Hey everybody, welcome to Bura. In this episode, we're going to be asking the question, should you buy a template to make your game? Alright, welcome back. Before we start this video, I want to make sure you like and subscribe. The more likes and subscribers we get, the more content we can make. So, if you want to make a game, should you make a game completely from scratch or should you buy a template? Well, the answer is a lot more complicated than you think. Now, a lot of people think if they go onto the Unity asset store or the Unreal marketplace, they can just buy a template, swap out the art assets, and then kind of have a good game. Well, there's a lot more complicated and processes to that in order to make a good game. What I highly recommend doing is that if you're just starting into game development is to make a ton of really small games from scratch. And by making a lot of really small games, they don't even have to be complete. They just have to be a game. If you do that, you'll probably be a lot better off in the long run. I always have said this if you've been a fan of this channel and been following me for years. If I have two students, one student makes a really big game and the other student makes 10 really small games, some of them don't even have to be complete. If you look into the future, maybe 6 months to a year, the second student is gonna be a lot better than the first one. The reason is that when you start a game from scratch, you learn all the processes, well, frankly, from scratch. And you get to figure out what went wrong. When you get better at something, it's not while you're making the actual game or product where you're getting better, it's the time in between projects and the reflection period. So the more time in between projects and reflection periods you have, the better. So again, the best way to do this if you're first starting out is to make maybe 10 really small games and you'll understand scope, how to get something out the door, and you'll learn a ton of other skills related to game development. So should you use a template to make a game? Well, again, if you're just starting out, you should make some games first, because if you go to a template, it's not going to make any sense if you've never coded before or you've never made a game. So everything is going to be really confusing because a lot of these templates do require some level of programming logic or code or something that you don't necessarily have right at the start. So that's why I recommend making the games. But should you use a template? Well, this all depends on what kind of game you want to make and what the scope of your game is. Now again, if you've been following me for years, I always say that you should make a very small scope game. So if you are going to use a template, you want to make sure that that template can do a lot of things and it has good reviews, documentation, etc. So let's take an example. Let's say you have made about 10 games and you want to make kind of a 2.5D platformer in Unity. Well, one thing that you could do is just download the Corgi Engine and you can basically make a game. You can swap out the art assets and make your game whatever it is you want to make. Now this is something I highly recommend that you do at least at some point. You basically download an engine and then you play around with it to make sure how it works. And if you really just spend your time in the engine and looking at the code and reverse engineering it, you're actually going to learn quite a bit. But as soon as you do something that's too outside what the template delivers, then you start to run into some problems. So if you are going to use a template, make sure that you download a demo of the template and you can do what it is you want to do. If there's anything that's outside the scope of that template, just simply don't do it. Find a good way to make your game with the template that exists. Now, of course, you can use some extra functionality. So let's say you want to make a platformer game and there's just one mechanic that makes your game a little bit different. Just make that one mechanic in the Corgi engine and then make your game. What you don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. And this is something that a lot of schools teach and is absolutely incorrect. So when you first make your game, or any project for that matter, you want to work within the confines of the template that you're using and, well, frankly, reality. Because if you really want to reinvent the wheel, that's going to take a lot of time and testing, and it might not even work in the end. A lot of schools teach that you should always do something new, but this is something that is completely false. You should do something that's just a little bit different from what's currently out there, and that is, believe it or not, different enough for the consuming public. If you make something that's too different, the public will simply not understand it. Maybe a few people will get it, but most of the time you'll get 1-star reviews saying people don't get it. And in the gaming community, if people don't get it, they are going to be irate. Because gaming is a lot more mature than it used to be, there are archetypes in game mechanics. So if you want to make a platformer with maybe one simple addition to it, that's a really good thing. If you want to make some completely new game, that's a lot riskier and it probably will fail. Now, if you want to do something that's completely innovative, that's great. Do it on your own time. But to get the fundamentals down, a lot of creative people in a lot of different industries will make standard types of media, and this will get the foundation and the fundamentals of their craft to go make that new innovative thing. For example, there are directors that start in sitcoms, there are musicians that start with jingles, and there are artists that simply just do simple graphic design works. You always have to be a master of the fundamentals, and to do that, you should make something that's really basic and really something that people can access. And the example of the Corgi Engine is a good example. If you want to make just a simple 30-level platformer and release it to the App Store or Steam or whatever, this is a very good use of time. And remember, you don't have to overthink this. You can literally just download one of these templates and just make something that is good to play and release it. That's all you really have to do if you are going to use a template. So the other thing about templates today is that there are a lot of really good templates and there are a lot of mediocre and bad templates. In fact, there's probably a lot of mediocre and bad templates versus the good ones. If you are going to use a template where you can basically just swap out the assets and make a game as quickly as possible. That's the whole point of a template. If you really want to dive deeper into the source code, you're more than welcome to do that. That is something that's really good. But if you just download a template that is practically ready to go and to add in your own content to, that is the kind of template that you want to buy. So the other caveat to this is that if you want to make a really big game like Assassin's Creed or Overwatch, those games are really big in scope and they require lots of people and lots of hours to actually make it work. That is a poor project to do. Do something really small. Whenever I talk to game developers that are just starting out, I always say to them, take your idea, minus 99% of that idea, and that's probably what's going to come out. And this is a harsh reality, but it's absolutely true. You want to lower the scope immensely to get your project out there, because once you release a project, you actually learn more by coding it, releasing it, testing it, and seeing what the public has to say. You learn more by that whole process versus making one big long project that will eventually be canceled because you picked a project that was too big in scope. Now, of course, you could always learn the hard way, which I definitely did, is when you have one, two, or multiple projects fail because they are way too big in scope, you'll say to yourself, okay, I'm just gonna build something simple and get it out there. So this is something I highly recommend that you do. If you use a game studio name, if that studio blows up, you can keep that name. If it doesn't do anything, well, you can just start a new studio. You can just make a different name. It doesn't have to be something that's attached to your name. And I highly recommend not using your name. I would just use some kind of blanket studio to make your projects, because if you fail in those studios, it doesn't really matter. But if you succeed, well, I guess you succeed. So I look at the Unreal Marketplace all the time, and there are some really good templates out there. But again, if the scope is too big, the template isn't going to matter because it's going to take too much time and energy to actually get that game out there. So pick something that's a little bit smaller. You want to pick a game that a person can maybe complete within maybe 1 to 2 hours. This is the kind of project that you want to do. If you get reviews that saying that the game is too short, well, you might get some reviews saying that. But believe it or not, times have changed, and if you make your price relatively smart and the experience is really good, you will get a lot of good reviews. And if in the description you say that this is a 1 to 2 hour experience, then people can understand what the scope it is that they're getting of a game before they actually buy it. In the description, you always want to be as upfront with the customer as possible, but that's a topic for a different time. All right, so that concludes this video. Do you download templates? Have you downloaded a template and never used it before? I want to read your comments down below. Remember that this channel doesn't do a Patreon, instead we sell our digital products down below. The more money you get for the content that you buy below, the more free content on this channel you can make, and the more content we can make on my e-learning company, Mammoth Interactive. If you really like this channel, you can subscribe to Mammoth Interactive's huge library of content. We release 20 to 60 hours of fresh new content per month every single month. We release game development tutorials, Blender development tutorials, machine learning tutorials, web development tutorials, and many, many more. We have monthly and yearly options. It really does help us out when you subscribe. Our goal is to get to 10,000 paid monthly subscribers on Mammoth Interactive. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.